Thank you for joining us at this session on the UK as a hub for international capital. My name's Katie Ramsey and I'm head of the Global Venture Capital Unit at the Office for Investment in UK Government. I am joined by Sam Tidswell-Norrish, who is partner at private equity firm Access Holdings, founder and chair of OPUS and Day Zero. Oh, you even got a clap there, you've got a fan. And a leading voice in fintech. My colleague from across Whitehall, Bushby, who's doing incredibly exciting things as ventures lead in the UK government's £500 million sovereign AI fund. And we have Dr. Jakob Mökander from General Catalyst Institute. He is VP, Vice President of Policy and an alumni of the Tony Blair Institute. And Tom Grant, who is partner at venture capital firm Ventura and formerly of Aviva. So welcome to you all. Thank you very much for joining us. A really great panel. And we're here to talk about UK as a hub for international capital from the point of view where we're seeing momentum accelerating, what international investors are looking for, and what conditions are necessary to ensure that the UK remains leading those charts that my friends in UK private capital just presented. So we've obviously getting a lot right. When you look at any stats, whether it's of unicorns in the UK, whether it's venture capital funding, we're only behind the US and China. If I want to start with you, Sam, what is it that we are getting right to drive such a great founder ecosystem and innovation?
Thanks for, well, wow.
We're struggling to hear.
It's quite an odd setup.
Yeah, if you all have the headsets on, you can hear. We're struggling to hear ourselves.
As long as you guys can hear, we're good. I'm a big advocate and fan of the EIS-SEIS program. I think people forget how important it is getting people into making early stage investments and opening up the retail market in the UK. And I was Googling stats on how much has been deployed since inception. And nearly $35 billion has been deployed into 60,000 companies. That has such a marked impact on how the UK landscape evolves. So yeah, I'm a big proponent for that. And the US doesn't have anything similar. The US mindset is more of they want to make early stage investments and generally put their capital to work and are a bit more risk on. Yeah. But they have nothing like it. The QSB system is non-comparable.
Yeah, and we see it when we have visiting delegations from overseas, from Latin America. They all want to hear about EIS, SEIS, and how they can replicate it in their own countries. Jakob, what do you think the UK is doing that's driving innovation?
I think UK has a number of advantages, some of which can actually affect and others which are more structural. Just for context, so General Catalyst, we're a global VC firm, but London and UK is our biggest investment hub outside the US, and there are reasons for that. First of all, we do have really big talent pools around the universities in London. That partly has to do with how attractive London is as a location for global capital. And I think that some of the visa decisions that have been made around global talent visas are a good idea. The second thing is actually the ecosystem that has come out and emerged. And you see that in the investments that are done, not just in the startup ecosystem, but also from the big tech companies in London, especially around King's Cross. Then there are other structural things that are really more at the macro level. So if you think about London as a capital hub, there is no equivalent in Europe. And there were theories and there were risk assessments after Brexit what would happen. But if anything, we've actually seen London pulling further away from its European continental competitors. So we are using this both as a market in and of itself, but also as a gateway, not just to Europe, but also for Asia.
Yeah, it's really great to hear, especially for such a large investor like General Catalyst. Tom, what about yourselves? I mean, you've recently done some incredible investments, notably in Alaka. What do you think we're getting right, and what attracted Ventura to make that investment?
Yeah, so company quality. We think that the quality of UK-based businesses is very high for all sorts of foundational reasons that these guys have hit on already. But particularly within sectors, financial services, Ventura does a lot in financial services. We think there's plenty more to do there. And as you highlight, Alaka Bank is a really exciting new investment of ours coming in at the Series D round.
Fastest growing fintech of all time in the UK.
Fastest UK fintech
Yeah.
of all time, which takes some doing.
But I think also fastest growing tech firm by, was it Deloitte's reckoning, of across Europe?
Second fastest.
Second fastest.
Yeah. But no, so some good stats there, which sort of reveals quality. And then, you know, not our area, but well-established strengths in life sciences, biotech, talking in the university world, increasing sort of commercialization and getting it out into defense, cyber, AI, etc., which we're doing more in. So we like all of those areas.
I'm going to come to you again, Tom, on defence, because we are seeing that. I mean, it's just the amount of conversations I'm now having on defence, which my time in government, 2 years ago, I was not talking about that. Obviously, the Ministry of Defence were, but I wasn't, and I was firmly in the world of tech. Now that in venture capital, it is the tech spending that is required to ensure that nations are resilient, and that defence is adequate and sufficient in times of geopolitics, and increasing spending budgets is incredibly interesting. So we'll come to that in a bit, but first of all, I want to interject with, Will, I think you are dominating headlines, your team at the moment. Obviously, AI is anyway, but the great stuff that the UK government Sovereign AI Fund has been doing of late, to give everyone context, it's a £500 million fund. You will have seen all the headlines. Again, the colleagues at UKPC flashed up a slide earlier with that British racing green. Please tell us a bit more about that fund.
Yeah, sure. I think sort of by definition, I have to be bullish on the UK, but generally, I think it's a really exciting moment for the UK at the moment, and sort of pulling on a few threads that the other panelists mentioned. I think there's a bunch of different areas on the AI value chain, from, if you look at it as a holistic thing from energy all the way to applications. I think there's a bunch of different nodes along that value chain where the UK can really create world-leading companies. And this is not just creating a UK version of something that's done elsewhere, but really globally leading companies built and scaling in the UK, and that's sort of what we're here to try and foster. So we're trying to use capital that we have, but alongside that with other levers of government, things that only government can provide, to provide the environment for these companies to scale. And we're incredibly optimistic. We've made some good early investments. The pipeline is amazing. We see a lot of amazing companies. So we're incredibly bullish on the UK as a place to do business, especially in the AI and AI adjacent ecosystem.
Yeah, and we're seeing that. I mean, since your launch, the amount of companies that we work with that are just really wanting to be connected to yourselves. I think that is probably the hardest thing at the moment, is managing that pipeline, but also hearing from international investors, sovereign wealth funds around the world that we would work with on a regular, I don't want to say day-to-day, but incredibly regular basis, with all of our embassies and high commissions around the world supporting those sovereign wealth funds to deploy capital here. All of them, and I don't want to say all of them, but a lot of them, are just WhatsApping me saying, how can I have a conversation on sovereign AI? But I think the fund is working more on the actual deployment and portfolio companies right now, but that would be a great mark of success.
Yeah, I think it's a mark of James Wise is sort of came from Matt Clifford's AI Opportunities Action Plan. James Wise has done a lot of really good work on the strategy that we take, and I think it's sort of meeting founders and investors on their level and not sort of positioning yourself very differently. We're sort of out there, very high touch, very high velocity, and I think that kind of approach, especially in the UK, seems to be resonating very well with founders. And as you say, we have a lot of inbound, but I think it's a good problem to have when that's our biggest problem.
Yeah, and that's where also for any founders in the room, that is where government can help. And I think that there's been a lot of interest of, it's not just money from the fund, it's the government, the support that can be given as well. So any founders in the room, please be in touch with me, my team. That is what the Department for Business and Trade is here for, as much as my immediate team are working with VCs and attracting investment capital into the UK. On AI and deep tech, we're seeing governments around the world being very strategic about their investments. What do you think will, and anyone else on the panel, please, do you think are the signals that the UK is giving off that is making us so strategically interesting to overseas governments to invest in our deep tech and AI?
Oh, I'm sure there'll be some good other thoughts, but I think we're starting to see a real significant like agglomeration benefit of just scale. And if you get out there in the ecosystem, especially in AI, it's very interesting at the moment. But other spaces like defence, there's so much going on in London at the moment, but it's sort of reflected elsewhere. We're going round the country and we're going to different cities. We're in Newcastle this week. We're going to Glasgow next week, and we're going to Manchester. There's real vibrancy in the ecosystem, and I think that's feeds on itself, and I think that's really significant. But then I also think doing things like sovereign AI, making commitments to founders that we're going to operate at speed, and we really believe that this is the moment, and that backing innovative companies is sort of the way that government can get a stake in the future development of the technology. So I think it's a really important moment, and we could always do a lot more, but I think the signs are good at the moment.
Yeah, and I think what people don't often see as well is the policy work behind the scenes as well that can make us look incredibly attractive on the world stage. We have an utter expert in policy here in Dr. Jakob. He was hiding the fact he was a doctor from me, but
Yeah, I was going to say, normally in VC circles you suppress that a bit, right?
Oh, really?
You purposely leave that
I
out.
really did not know that. I question why. But so you have a doctorate in AI governance, but also your policy work from the University of Oxford, no less. But your policy work with the Tony Blair Institute and now with General Catalyst. What are you seeing that makes the UK an investable opportunity, particularly in AI and deep tech?
So I will speak quickly to that, but then I think it's also important to look at what remains to be done also.
Sure.
I think that this government, insofar as there has been a direction, it has been growth focused, it has been technology, and it has been business friendly. We were big supporters of the Opportunities Action Plan, and I think that governments in this case should be working with as much enabling infrastructure as possible. So it's less about very surgical interventions, but more trying to lift all boats. There we have seen, for example, the British Business Bank is now starting to invest pension capital fund, and that is a step in the right direction. We want to see more of that. That is right now quite small. So just if you take, for example, there are countries like Australia and Canada where up to 20% of that capital is allocated into the future of technology, and I think that's the right way to go also in the UK. Another example is closer relationship with Europe. If we want to have a thriving startup ecosystem in the UK, we will need to get closer again to the single market and movements, both for goods, services, and also people. So that's really good signals. I think the biggest lever that has yet to be pulled is actually on public procurement. Because right now there is a big disconnect between supporting the innovation ecosystem on the one hand, but actually what most startups need is not a few million more funding. They need pathways to contracts and scaling. And whether we're talking in defense or healthcare, those procurement cycles often follow their own logic. They can be very conservative. They can benefit legacy systems, whether they are the most cost efficient, or whether those capabilities are even what we need, whether that is to meet military threats or aging population. So I think that is both what has been done well, but also the biggest lever that has yet to be pulled.
Sure, thank you very much. Now, so at the actual LP level, Tom, you at Ventura, you've led some incredibly interesting rounds, and the LPs that you brought into rounds with you are very, very varied. What are you seeing that is attractive to LPs in the UK?
So just a quick word on our model. We operate on a deal-by-deal basis, so we are identifying companies and then sourcing capital into those opportunities individually. We do have committed capital alongside that, so really there's three sources of capital. There's the GP balance sheet, co-investors on a deal-by-deal basis, and some committed capital as well, which is predominantly sort of larger institutional type mandates. The mix of investor base, they are attracted to, that's my point about quality. When we are presenting, when we've identified an interesting investment opportunity and we're introducing it to our client base, our LP base, they are going on quality, perceived quality and evidence of it. So take Alaka as we spoke about it earlier. That is quite clearly a high quality asset. That is a UK business that is using this new capital and share price to embark on a European expansion and accelerating its growth. So that's sort of exporting UK quality into Europe. Client side, the largest single investor was a UK base, but the majority of the capital that we brought into our investment into Alaka was non-UK. And so that's a slightly perverse situation where you've got at the point of investment an entirely UK P&L banking UK SMEs with the BBB as an important participant in that. But we're a UK-based manager, and the majority of the capital we brought into that opportunity was non-UK. So
it's great credentials for how we appeal to international investors.
very much so.
But where are the UK domestic LPs?
Yeah, on paper, that's a clear deal that you should be seeing long-term sovereign domestic capital coming into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sam, I think you were about to say something on that. No?
I can.
Please, don't shy away. I'm government, but I'm not offended.
My one's particularly loud. Yeah, the UK LP landscape is it's not that vibrant, which is a challenge. And I raise capital professionally. It's my role in a private equity firm. And we have to look internationally, really, to raise meaningful LP capital, other than a couple of quite well-known names. The beauty, however, of the UK is that almost every large allocator has their European HQ in London. And that's something I think we do really need to lean into. And I have some ideas for you, Katie, not for on stage, but I think spending time with the investment banks, private placement groups, and really leaning into those groups is going to be important to continue to kind of cement our position and continue to convene.
Yeah.
Because it's not an easy landscape to navigate. There's not many family offices. There's not many pension funds. There's no sovereign wealth fund other than sort of you guys. So yeah, it's a tricky one to navigate when you're fundraising here.
Yeah, so I was on stage recently with Louis Taylor from the BBB. The stats that UKPC shared earlier about LP UK domestic pension funds and where that flows into UK venture, and the answer is not much at all. I will champion, however, recent closes by the BBB that I think it was a £200 million fund, the recent investments into Wave and OPUS to spin out Kraken, and that did bring in M&G, NatWest Cushion, and Egon UK. So at least we are seeing, that is a great movement in the right direction. I think the more we champion it, there's things have gone through the House of Lords recently that is proposing mandation and where we might end up with that. My background is as a fund manager in the city, and there's a whole host of questions around mandation and from a regulatory viewpoint as well. But I think the British Business Bank and the British Growth Partnership being an institutional bridge that can show proof of concept of you don't need to mandate if there can be some great investments unlocked that deliver return. But appreciate there is a lot of work to be done there, and that was the diplomatic civil servant soundbite there. Going back to the market, where are you seeing exciting developments? We've spoken about AI, but what other sectors look interesting to you all? Tom, I'm going to go to you.
Well, you said you'd come back to defence.
Defence.
So
let's do it now.
Or stroke dual use. So one of our portfolio companies is a business called Together, which is a fantastic Portuguese business, increasingly British. They, as part of a recent financing, committed to investing 400 million over 5 years in the UK, and that's a big number. And so that comes with a new factory in Swindon, so the largest drone manufacturer in this country, and meaningful multi-100 million pound contracts with UK government, RAF, Home Office, At the moment, in the air, there will be multiple drones flying over the English Channel doing migrant crossing surveillance. Together is a reconnaissance and surveillance business rather than a sort of one-way strike business. An investment in the West Wales former RAF base. And so that's a R&D hub whereby the company can use that facility to fly out over into the Irish Sea in former MOD airspace and be able to conduct their trial missions effectively and unhindered. So that's a great case study of a European business taking meaningful proactive action in the UK, putting a lot of capital down. That factory used to be the Renault car manufacturer outside Swindon, and now it's a drones manufacturing business.
Yeah, fascinating evolution in terms of technology, and the fact that it's not just London either. These are companies that are having impact across the country. But also to touch on the LPs, the other investors you brought in with yourselves, the NATO Innovation Fund.
Well, yeah, they participated in the most recent round. They didn't come in via us, but so the NATO Innovation Fund is an investor there.
Bailey Gifford, were they already invested? Or?
No, they came in. And NSIF as well, which is a part of the BBB, which is orientated around defence and cybersecurity. So
I think that's a great example of a VC, but alongside large LPs and the likes of the NATO Innovation Fund. These are the success stories as well that we really should be championing.
But it's worth noting, so the UK budgets are going up in defence, right? Yeah. And there's a bit of pulling back in other departments, etc. But budgets are going up, and the UK is the largest defence budget in Europe. The Germans might be catching up, or that might change soon. But nevertheless, the UK's got a lot of capital to deploy into procurement of sort of edge technologies. And so on the sort of what attracts foreign capital into the UK, that's one of the areas.
Yeah. I also want to point out as well, for any VCs in the room, you can sort of comprehend how Department for Business and Trade would be supporting companies. Remember that as well for any of your portfolio companies. Use us as a free resource, a free asset that is there to help drive your portfolio companies to greater success. Exporting around the world, like you mentioned, Tom, with Alica now looking overseas. That is exactly what we are here to help with, as well as us as a team catalysing LP investment from around the world into yourselves as VCs. I now want to actually look at the US in particular, because we're always compared unfavourably to the US, saying that, you end up with the US on the cap table and then companies are dragged out there, they'll go list there. That's again why I would love the Takeva story of look how much they are now committing to the UK and having more UK investors on their cap table. It's no coincidence. I'm sure that is what is helping drive that. But Sam, you have built a private equity business in the US. You've acquired a venture platform in the US and have created one, I think, a global platform as well. What are you seeing as what the US gets right and where we can do better here?
I don't think it's necessarily fair to compare the markets because they are totally different and much larger. I just got back this morning from the US and I was in Dallas and New York. Those are two cities where if you're raising a large fund, you can raise $1 billion in a day there. It's just a totally different scale. And so, I try not to compare the two. I do think we can take a lot of learnings from the US, though. Their mindset generally, it's like the heartbeat of capitalism. They're much more risk on. The UK is typically a lot more conservative, and that has quite a meaningful impact at the lower end of the spectrum in the early stage environment. The other thing I think the US has done particularly well, which we're following suit in, is leveraging media in venture capital. Examples like A16Z and Sequoia, recently acquiring at the GP level media platforms and hiring partners with media backgrounds and influencers, I think is a really interesting trend. Yeah. And obviously we've got the iconic Harry Stebbings here, and he's replicating that model. And you can think of that, there was a brilliant article called about mullet capitalism. You can think about what are the operating companies that can then leverage the operating company and the balance sheet to not be dependent on management fees, to then build a venture capital platform out back and use it as an origination engine and a support mechanism, which is effectively what we did at OPUS with Day Zero, using OPUS for origination. But I think we're going to see a lot more of that as well, which has been quite prevalent in the US.
Yeah, sure. Media, hugely important. I think sovereign AI has been doing that incredibly well. Jakob, it's a great point for you to come in on as well. General Catalyst, you are, what prompted you all at General Catalyst to set up here and invest here?
Yeah, let me start with some numbers. So of our total global capital allocation, 70% is US, 20% is Europe and UK, and 10% is India. We're not active in Africa, Latin America, China. If we look at the European allocation, UK is definitely overrepresented. So roughly half of the UK-European allocation is in the UK. And this was the first office that we also opened outside. And I think a lot of that has to do with the networks, because venture capital is actually a network business. A bit what you said, that it's unfair to compare countries, because even within the US, there's a huge range of environments. And actually, most of these networks are quite concentrated, whether that is in Boston or Silicon Valley. And I think that there's a lot of overlap into those personal networks that work really well here in London, both for technical talent, but also for capital structures. What we are doing now is that when we're talking about resilience, so we're not really using the term sovereignty, because we have big investments in US, UK, and Europe. But we want each of these regional bloc or countries to be more resilient to various kind of geopolitical shock, whether that is war in Ukraine, whether that is energy shocks, whether that is disruptions at home due to cyber attacks. And I think what is needed here is a mixture between domestic or local or regional capabilities and partnership where that matters. So what we are really excited about here is to build an industrial base, both in UK but also Europe, that can both contribute to that resilience of societies, but also, we believe, be very profitable investments in the next 10 to 20 years.
Sure, thank you.
Can I ask Jakob a question? You're Swedish, right?
Yeah.
Why is Sweden so good at venture?
So I think there are a few reasons for it. If we start with the networks that I mentioned, I think that Sweden are a few generations ahead, whereby the early exit in the internet era from Skype, Spotify, Minecraft have then translated out to second and third generation founders. But then you can ask, why did Sweden have those outsized early digital unicorn in the first place? There are actually a few policy reasons for that. Already in the early 90s, Sweden gave tax break for people to buy home PC. We rolled out broadband in the entire countries before the year 2000, and was actually almost a decade ahead of countries like France, Germany, and to some extent also UK. Then there has also been more targeted policy interventions. For example, you have tax-free capital gains as long as you reinvest that into new startups, and that has really been a positive engine as opposed to a handbrake. And I believe that it's a mistake that there are voices in Europe who want to go in the other direction and tax, for example, even unrealized capital gains. I think that would not just be detrimental, that would be catastrophic for the industry. But then, if I can do a little bit of hobby sociology, there is something interesting also about that. If you look at the composition of the population in Sweden, only 100 years ago, almost everyone was small-scale farmers. So they were neither aristocracy who was landowning and rent-owning, but they were also not labor in the sense that they had salary. They were responsible for sowing and reaping. And I do think that there's a through line in that small-scale independent farmer mindset and the startup culture in Sweden.
That's fascinating. We are near time, 5 minutes. Thank you very much. I will use this moment then to also highlight that we support in the Office of Investment. We're obviously here to attract international capital into the UK, where there are also high-level things like free trade agreements that you wouldn't necessarily see tangibly, but all of that at the umbrella sort of high level can really help unlock investment into the UK. I'm also mentioning this because the work of our ministers too, they go around the world, particularly our investment minister. He this week and last week has been in Australia, Malaysia and Singapore. The size of the investments held by those nations into the UK, for example, Australia, their superannuation funds, some of the fastest growing funds in the world, they currently hold about 41 billion in investments in the UK. And as a result of this visit, there's now, I don't know if it's a target that's been set or an agreement, but something has been affirmed that will be targeting now from those funds in the US, in Australia alone, 99 billion by, I think, 2030 or 2035. So all of that work can really help unlock money into VCs in the UK that then should trickle down and benefit our companies and drive economic growth. The policy point, obviously I said at the start that my team, we work with the likes of Treasury to really try and shape policy positively. I won't say too much about that because I know, on the positive, the proposed entrepreneurs tax relief, we are constantly looking at how that would align or emulate work that's being done around the world. So rest assured we're here. When I put on LinkedIn that we're running consultations, fill them out. We really do listen to them, and I do my bit to shout about them as best as I can. To wrap up then, and that might actually lead nicely into this point, what is it that the UK can do? If you had to name one unlock, maybe if you're fast, you can say two, but one key thing that would really unlock international capital into the UK, in your opinion. Sam, let's start with you.
I'm going to take a leaf out of Sweden's book, tax relief for entrepreneurs.
Sure. Thank you.
I think it's something that we're trying to do in our broader mandate of sovereign AI, but I think procurement is a huge unlock in the UK. Public procurement, if we can get level the playing field and make it easier to use, easier to manage for earlier stage companies, especially with the pace of technological change, I think that's a really, really important thing to get right.
Yeah, I think you called it the 1,000-ton gorilla, and yeah, absolutely right.
So I agree with both of the previous points. So to go down the list, I would say increase the share of pension capital that is allocated also in the venture space, and especially in UK startups.
Thank you. And Tom?
It's hard going last.
It is. What else is there?
I'd say reiterate the procurement point.
Sure.
I think we've had the sort of classification of the core industries, and then having detailed and easy to access procurement pathways within each of those industries would be very helpful.
Thank you very much. And to end on a positive point as well, so you can understand the work of government that doesn't necessarily make it into the press. But recently, my team, we have had visitors over from Taiwan, from Japan, and this is just part of our day-to-day regular work, looking at setting up funds here in fintech, in deep tech, and when there is geopolitical conflict around the world or instability in the US, that really does reinforce why the UK is such a respected and valued destination. One example I can give as well is obviously we're still in the conflict, but when the airspace opened up for one of our Middle Eastern nation friends, the first country that they sent a ministerial delegation to a couple of weeks ago was to the UK. So I think we shouldn't forget where we do stand on the world stage, but my team certainly will keep doing its bit to unlock everything that you recommended there. Does anyone have any questions? We've probably got about minus 30 seconds for a question, but if someone's got one, please come and grab my mic. I don't know. Oh, thanks, Jakob. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much. I think you may have answered already, but I just wanted to know, so the previous, as someone who's trying to understand the VC kind of culture in the UK and Europe.
I'm going to say now, because I think it's quite hard for us to hear, but your starting point is context, VC culture in Europe.
Yes. In the previous talk we saw there was a sharp decline of number of investments and total values of investments in early stage startups from VC. I'm wondering, where do you guys see the change for that to happen to increase the total value and total number of deals? Is it through policy changing?
So sorry, I think you're saying, sorry, it's just a struggle to hear, but that we'd seen, no, it's not your fault. We'd seen a dip in investment into the UK from
total
Europe.
Investments, yeah. In the previous talk, that's what I could gather. So I guess moving forward, where would you see that to be increased? Is it through policy making? Making tax-free benefits through matching through SEIS, or is it through something else?
So I would say I think a lot of the dip was wider macro conditions like COVID, like Russia, Ukraine. I don't know if anyone's got any other opinions on why there had been a dip.
Well, we were starting at quite globally peaky numbers on the left-hand side of the chart, so that's not a UK-only picture, is the first point. Second point is, anecdotally, I would say that this year has started pretty fast. There's been quite a lot of activity in the UK, certainly that I've seen and participated in. So.
Yeah, HSBC Innovation Banking, they recently released a report that showed, again, I don't know if it was UK or European-wide, but that there'd been a bump in Series A to Series C VC term sheets that I think were coming across there. I don't know what the universe was, but that's obviously very encouraging. But it depends where you are in the stage. You know, if you're raising A to C, that's great. Scale ups are in focus. That's where there's been like the valley of death. But if you're a more earlier stage, then that's not necessarily the great outcome for you. But I don't know if anyone else got anything to say there. Will?
Yeah, I think one that we were invested in, Europe's largest seed round in ineffable intelligence, is a really big testament to the fact that, you know, these larger, very early stage, pre-product, pre-revenue rounds can get done. And I think obviously one swallow doesn't make a summer, but, you know, it's a pretty strong sign that these larger deals don't have to always go to the Bay Area to get done.
Yeah, that's David Silver, ex-DeepMind, with ineffable intelligence there. But no, please, carry the conversation on afterwards. I'm sure there's much debate that could happen around that. But thank you, everyone. Really appreciate you joining us. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks to the panel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.